it's, if I can say so, in this case, cozy, of course, but in some sense, you know, it's a very pleasant place to be. Now, I know that most of you are tired because it was a long day. Many of you are coming from overseas. And I am therefore happy to say that you will have now 2 speeches. The first one is mine. And fortunately for you, it's almost close to the end. The second one will be from Mr. STEPIC, and there are, I would say, 3 reasons for Mr. STEPIC to be our speaker tonight. The first one, I'm not going to give the reasons in a rational order. The first one is because he's the sponsor of this dinner. So, but that would certainly not be a sufficient reason, you know, for having invited him as a speaker. So there is a second reason, which is that he's a CEO of Raiffeisen Bank International, which is, as I'm sure many of you are aware, a very important bank in Austria, which is particularly involved in what used to be called Eastern Europe. So that's the second reason, and we are here at the heart of Europe. We are at the heart of history and the heart of Europe. That's the second reason. But even that would not be enough. So there is a third reason. And the third reason is that, as I am sure you will see in a second, he is, believe me or not, but you will believe me in a second, a good speaker. And according to my spies, nobody has ever seen anyone sleeping when Mr. STEPIC was talking. Mr. STEPIC, I'm very happy to give you the floor.
Dear Monsieur Montbrial, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm happy to be here. You've heard already, so I don't want to repeat that. Secondly, dear Monsieur Montbrial, I have read your message on your website as a preparation for this event, in which you articulate your hope that this conference plays a modest but significant role in averting misfortune of inter alia, the breakup of the European Union, a collapse of the European Atlantic couple, a fragmented world with more or less pure national interests resulting in wars, social unrest, and God knows what. That shouldn't have been funny. I'm sorry. You state that we have to find back to ways of global governance, which ends with win-win situations in opposition to lose-lose situations, which seems to be the prevailing risk nowadays. Now, I absolutely agree that we must find win-win situations and solutions, especially in Europe, where a further acceleration of the crisis would have a major impact on the entire world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm a European banker, I will concentrate in the next 15 minutes on European governance and European macroeconomic issues, as they are strongly interrelated. And if I'm talking too long, please don't go asleep, if possible. Just make some noises or make it like this or like this. Then automatically I know this is the end of my speech and I will end it. Okay? Good. So this is a sort of a bilateral agreement which we have found for the next 15 minutes. So, the future of the euro is one of the major concerns we are currently confronted with when talking to customers and international investors. So everybody knows that I'm a banker in this country at least, and when they're approaching me on Sunday, when I want to have my peace and smoke my pipe at home, somebody phones me and say, Herbert, first of all, will the euro last? Number two, what shall I do with my money? Shall I buy gold? I always say, for heaven's sake, no gold. I have invested in gold because my first chairman said a bank should invest in gold. I had gold 17 years. I was losing year by year, not gaining any sort of interest. And finally, 6 months after I have sold my gold, which were Krüger at that time, they doubled in price. So this is all about gold and good investment. You know, I'm a banker. Thirdly, they say, should we buy land? And usually I end the conversation, because I cannot convince them anyhow, and say, look, my friends, leave it on your saving books and wait for better times. So this is my advice, frankly speaking. Now, undoubtedly, there are major economic and political risks we are facing currently in the Eurozone, which led to fear and great uncertainty in the markets. Now, this fear is regularly fueled by media reports and analysts glooming about the end of the euro currency. But what is really going on currently? The current struggle is not about keeping or abandoning the euro project, but about avoiding the painful economic fallout of sovereign bankruptcies. This is what we are really talking about. While the question is how to avoid default of some weaker members, the Eurozone as a common currency area is in total even relatively strong. The Eurozone in aggregate has a comparatively low public debt level of 88% to GDP. This compares very favorably against the US with 100% or Japan with 233%. The budget deficit is even more constructive, standing at 4.1% of GDP in the Eurozone against 9.3% in the US and 10.3% in Japan. And finally, when talking about the need of external financing, the current account deficit in the Eurozone is a meager minus 0.8%, and it compares with current account deficits in the UK, for instance, with minus 2.5, and the US with minus 3.1. So, in average, I would say, also the fundamentals of the euro is not so bad if I compare it with other currencies. Now, one thing I am also answering my friends when they give me unpeace on Saturday and Sunday evenings, when they ask me, will the euro hold, I always ask him, hold against what? Or lose value against what? So what do we have? Do we have a strong dollar or a weak dollar? I would say we have a very weak dollar. And is Japanese yen a currency to invest in? I would say it's nice to read it in the papers, but definitely I would not like to invest in it. So that is one of the other reasons why I believe that the euro will stand. Now, unfortunately, this average fundamental strength of the Eurozone in aggregate does not rule out financing problems of individual countries. In the case of Greece, even a debt restructuring. Therefore, the issue can be argued as follows. First, a default of a Eurozone member does not automatically endanger the euro per se or its value. Single countries cannot print their way out of the crisis and devalue the euro. And should a default of one or more Eurozone countries happen, something which I'm convinced can and will be avoided, and Greece definitely will stay the exception, the fallout would affect the financial system, having to cope with substantial capital losses and the real economy, suffering a deep and drawn-out recession, but not the price stability of the currency. In such a scenario, the risk of deflation would be higher, like in Japan in the 90s. Second, a breakup of the Eurozone is very unlikely as the costs of an exit are exorbitantly high. Due to the export dependency of its members, and much more importantly, after 12 years of integrating financial markets, the breakup of the currency would lead to a massive devaluation of weak currency markets, banking runs, recessions, and missing refinancing options for those countries. Most banks in these countries would need to be restructured, leading to enormous capital losses also in core Europe, including Germany and France. Many French and German banks would need to be nationalized, which would lead to a deep and protracted recession. Now, a breakup of the Eurozone is a classic lose-lose situation, and the financial economic costs of a breakup, as well as the default of a major Euro country, are so high for everybody that it will be avoided. That means to avoid it, and the means to do that are difficult to agree, though, as countries which are stability-focused are eager that a safety net for Euro countries does not set an incentive continuing piling up high debt. That's a major argument when talking to Mr. Schäuble a week ago in Frankfurt or wherever in Frankfurt. This is his major argument against any other sort of solution than the prevailing path. So we need fundamental reforms, that's undisputed. But what kind of reforms are needed? Reforms leading to more or less integration? As explained before, less integration, namely the breakup of the euro, is a very painful exercise and would send us most probably 20 years back in our development. Therefore, we need more integration. This means a coordinated economic and fiscal policy, the elimination of tax havens, and the implementation of certain mechanisms which may trigger the shift of authorities from local governments to Brussels. Otherwise, a common currency cannot work. However, there are a lot of different possibilities on how such fiscal unit can be structured. Degree of centralization, trigger mechanisms, trigger thresholds, members of the fiscal union, all members of the EU or the Eurozone members only. Now, according to the results of the negotiations last night, at least, the entire Eurozone plus 6 further EU members will establish a fiscal union which will be based on contracts separate from the EU.